Namaste. Haribo. My name is Janapati Das, and welcome to the Bhagavad Gita as it is class, wisdom class, yoga wisdom. And I would like to offer my respectful obeisances to you, and also take the opportunity to offer my most humble obeisances to Jagat Guru Siddhaswara Pananda Paramahamsa, Srila Prabhupada, and His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are continuing to read through chapter 4 of this wonderful book of wisdom. So we're going to start with some chanting, so please join along. Krishna Prestaya Uttale Srimati Sira Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Buddhale Srimate Sira Swarupananda Paramahamsa Itinamine Namo Sira Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Krishnayate Bhajashri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita in the C minor Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Bhakta-vrinda Bhajashri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Lagana Chemiranda Shakana Jana Shakala Chaksha Milizami Yanatasmai Sri Gula Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay, we are continuing on in Transcendental Wisdom, Transcendental Knowledge, Chapter 4. So we are continuing, Krishna talking to Arjuna about action, activities of karma, karmic reaction, and such. Text 22. Yadlicha lava santusto davandvatito vimatsalaha sama siddhava siddhaucha klipvapi na nibayate. Yadlicha, out of its own accord. Labha, gain. Santushta, satisfied. Dandava, duality. Atita, surpassed. Vimatsalaha, free from envy. Sama, steady. Siddhau, in success. Asiddhau, failure. Cha, also. Kritva, doing. Api, although. Na, never. Nibayate, is affected. He who is, translation, he who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady both in success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Wonderful verse. So we have some different Sanskrit words. Yadlicha, ya, it means coming from, and licha, the root word, has to do with going and coming. So it's coming from its own, out of its own accord, coming from its, in other words, coming from things that come to the living entity of its own accord, from its karmic reaction, from Krishna's grace, you know. This reminds me, he who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, reminds me of the mantra 1 in the Sri Ishopanishad. Everything animate and inanimate is owned and controlled by the Lord. And basically, I'm trying to say it, but I'm trying to remember it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But paraphrased, one who is satisfied by his own quota knows from what. I'm drawing blank here. From his own quota, you know, the living entity has its own quota. You know, there's a certain amount of things you shouldn't be striving for. He's satisfied with what he gets from what Krishna provides for him, knowing very well to whom it belongs. So he's not striving. He's not striving for trying to gain more than what he's already at. So they're satisfied with what he has. They're free from the duality of happiness and distress. You know, the up and down on the seesaw. Does not envy anyone, does not envy Krishna or the spiritual master. Wanting Krishna, especially the living entity in the material world, is full of envy, wants to be Krishna, is not satisfied with anything that they get. So it's steady in both success and failure. So success and failure is seen in relationship to Krishna. So it's not even if you're successful, you're successful. If you're not successful, you're not successful, as long as you're trying. And this is what Krishna is telling Arjuna to fight for him, not being attached to the results of his activities. So he's never entangled with all these things that come with being attached to the material nature being attached to material nature. So the word tusta, satisfied, one who is satisfied, right? And vimatsara, free from envy. Atsara is enviousness, and vim is with to be not bound by, right? So all these things is achieved by the focus of the living entity on his service to Krishna and his loving relationship with Krishna, following the instructions of the spiritual master. A Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but labors honestly. He labors honestly as far as it is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. So regardless of whether it's hot or cold, whether the things are easy or not easy, they keeps consistent. This is shtitaha. I think there's maybe a word in here, or maybe in the next verse. Shtitaha. Shtitaha means to, oh, here it is, another word, samaha. That's another Sanskrit word, steady in what they do. Here we go, regardless of what happens. You see these people that are amazing warriors or military people, they, despite the being all odds of challenge, or these people that climb the mountain, Mount Everest, they're steady. They are pushing themselves beyond their limits, regardless of whether they feel pain, no pain, cold, hot. Text 23, Gata Sangashya Muktasha Ganavashtita Chetasha Yajnaya Chara Taha Karma Samagagram Praviliyate. Gata Sangasha, unattached to the modes of material nature. So that's Gata and Sangasha, which is being unattached to the material world, unattached to the modes of material nature. Muktasya, of the liberated. Gana avashtita, situated in transcendence. Chetasha, of such wisdom. Yajnaya, for the sake of Yajna, Krishna. Acharata, so acting, karma, work. Samagram, in total. Praviliyate, merges entirely. So here's that word, another name of Krishna, Yajna, which means sacrifice, because all sacrifices, all actions done in sacrifice are for the sake of Krishna, which is why he's called Yajna with a capital Y. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. So as we go along, we can start picking up these words unattached to the modes of material nature, Gata Sangashya, right? And fully situated in transcendental knowledge, Jnana Avashtita. Wonderful. Purport by His Divine Grace. Becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from all dualities, and thus is freed from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the apex. It's the central point that the devotee tries to focus on, because happiness and distress, they're like what is termed as the two witches of allurement. Right? We have liberation and material bondage, right? So we have liberation from material unsavory, savoriness, is that the word? You become attached to something materially, you want to enjoy it, you try to enjoy it, it doesn't make it, then you want to get away from it, so there's this constant up and down. Similarly, things are going well materially, things are going not so well materially. There's this dualities, there's constant dualities in the material world. And you can go up and down the seesaw doing that, or on the seesaw, up and down, right? Instead, you just stay steady. You stay steady here. Situated in transcendence, Jnana Avashtita, Samaha, steady. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position or relationship to Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifices involve satisfying the Supreme Person, Krishna. So we're all, in reality, we're making sacrifices all over the place. We always make sacrifices. There's sacrifices for everything, even in attempting to, if you want to have a good body, you have to sacrifice eating really well, or you have to sacrifice your time to go out and work out, and the sacrifice of pain, uncomfortableness of trying to exercise, just to look good at the beach, right? So that's another sacrifice. If you want to make a lot of money, you have to sacrifice your time and your effort and getting, sleeping in the morning and going to work. And so we have sacrifices too, and that's why we have the word yajna. And the most beneficial sacrifice of the age is called the Sankirtan Yajna. And that's the hearing and chanting of Krishna's name. Why is that a sacrifice? When we think about a sacrifice, well, it is your time, it is your effort. You could be doing many other things to do that, but instead you take your time, your effort, your talents, and you focus on your chanting in Krishna, for Krishna's names, which is the greatest sacrifice because it involves Krishna. But all sacrifices ultimately involve Krishna in some way or another. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence. So the results of these sacrifices, merges into, brings us to Krishna, brings us to the goal of Krishna Bhakti Yoga. Other things maybe more indirectly or not even at all, they keep us in the material world. One does not suffer material effects. I'm going to read that sentence again. The resultant reaction of all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. Text 24. Brahmarpanam, Brahma Havir, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaiva Tena, Gatavayam, Bhatvam Kama, Samadhina. Brahma, spiritual nature. Arpanam, contribution. Brahma, the supreme. Havi, butter. Brahma, spiritual. Agnyao, in the fire of consummation. Brahmana, by the spirit soul. Hutam, offered. Brahma, spiritual kingdom. Eva, certainly. Tena, by him. Ganta evayam, to be reached. Brahma, spiritual. Karma, activities. Samadhina, by complete absorption. Translation, text 24. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So wonderful. The activity is Krishna, and the goal is Krishna, and the items are Krishna. So the consummation is complete. Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses, but for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul, entangled in material contamination, is sure to act in the material atmosphere and yet has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned souls can be cured by Krishna consciousness, as set forth here in the Gita. We see this a lot in medicine, actually. Sometimes they'll put a little bit of the virus, or if they do cancer treatment, they'll radiate, which usually causes cancer. Radiation is what causes cancer, but it can also remove the cancer from your body. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. That's an amazing sentence. Let me read that again, and take note of this, because it relates to the verse of this complete consummation. The more activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. Because the material world, it's not something that's really separate from Krishna. It is Krishna's energies. And in the activity of Krishna consciousness, just like when you put a iron pole into the fire, you have iron and then you have the the fire. There are two different elements, but when you put the iron in the fire, it ultimately takes on the qualities of fire. It's hot heat, it's got light, it's got, turning red and whatnot, the visual. So similarly, this is a really amazing statement by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada that's stating that we have a duty to, not just for ourselves spiritually, but for all living entities trapped in the material world, to engage in the process of sadhana bhakti, of giving people Krishna in any means possible, because the consummation of spiritual life, you really want to figure out how to make the world a better place. Chant Krishna's names, give people Krishna. This is the best way, because even to our eyes and maybe our ears and whatever else, we may chant Krishna's names, and the people around everything may seem the same, like, well, that was just, whatever, like you were singing Michael Jackson or something, and suddenly, nothing else happened, right? But actually, all those living entities within the present are spiritualized. They are on the path back to Krishna. It's a wonderful thing. Brahman means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual. And the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti, but when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. So the material world is actually spiritual, in its truest sense. But it is covered by an illusion of Maya. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness, thus offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agents of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter dovetailed for the cause of the Absolute Truth regains its spiritual quality. Krishna, wow, wonderful. Krishna consciousness is a process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in such a transcendental consciousness is called the yajna, or sacrifice for the Absolute. In that condition, the spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman. This is the method of Krishna consciousness. Wonderful, wonderful, amazing. Chant Krishna's names, There is nothing else that we can do. United Nations, countries passing laws, people trying to pass out pamphlets or whatever about, save the whales. Those are just really minor and not really effective things. We chant Krishna's names. To chant Krishna's names, and this is how we benefit. And everything becomes the offering, like a fire sacrifice. We put it all into the fire and we offer it to Krishna. And it's a wonderful analogy. It's beautiful. Text 25. Daivam evapare yajnam yogina parush pashate brahmagnava paleyajnam yajne aivo pajuvati. Daivam, in worshipping the demigods. Eva, like this. Apare, some. Yajnam, sacrifices. Yoginaha, the mystics. Parush, pashyate, worship perfectly. Brahma, the absolute truth. Agnau, in the fire of. Apare, others. Yajnam, sacrifice. Yajnena, by sacrifice. Eva, thus. Apajuvati, worship. Translation, text 25. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. And we've stated that before. The yajna there's a wide varieties of different sacrifices for different results, but ultimately they are all for Krishna. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performer only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factual sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, who is also known as Yajna. So, going back a little bit, there was a verse, and I'm gonna read it again because I want to reference it. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Prita. So that's text 11 from chapter 4. And that's, people have different sacrifices for different kinds of surrender to Krishna, right? Different varieties of surrender. Some people have very little surrender. They have a lot of material desires, and maybe they even use worshiping demigods and whatnot for particular material desires. So that's not complete surrender to Krishna, but it is a sacrifice, needless to say. But the factual sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is also known as Yajna. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be played within two primary divisions, namely sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods such as Indra. the sun god, etc. And sometimes there are different Judeo-Christian, Islamic people who sacrifice their particular material possessions and security and whatnot for an idea of like enjoying materially in heaven, you know, having the 72 virgins, or now I will suffer and sacrifice, and later I will have, you know, it will give me the merit to get these things. So that's another way of looking at it here. And others who are impersonalists sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bahu Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. In other words, so this is an important point also, that sometimes people look, Christians, some of the monotheists, Christians, Muslims, Jewish people look to Hindus, and they're looking at these people, Bhavishvaravadi, believer in many gods. They'll say that Hindus are believers in many gods, but the real ultimate essence of Vedic thought is that Krishna, there is monotheism, and that all these so-called gods are actually empowered living entities. They're not really gods, but here you have it here. People worshiping the empowered living entities, but others who worship the impersonal feature of the absolute truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire, and thus their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. So these are Mayavadis. Such impersonalists spend their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme, which is true, because the absolute truth is in the scriptures, and in the Vedanta Sutras, they are as they are. There was no need to interpret them as Shankaracharya did, even though it was a reason why he did it. The impersonalists have gone on speculating about the Vedanta Sutras based on the speculation of Shankaracharya. And so they spend their time in philosophical speculation, but Krishna makes it very clear that one who engages in material, fruitive activities and philosophical speculations can never know him. Well, it's true, because the monists are not interested in knowing about the Supreme Absolute Truth as being Krishna, as Bhagavan. They're interested in the Brahman realization, or merging, as it said here, merging into the impersonal feature of Krishna, which they see as the all in all. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonal sacrifices his material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering of the self is being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna-conscious person like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus he is a first-class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. So the important point of knowing is that Krishna was like wanting to be a renunciate and just to sacrifice things to not avoid fighting, right? And so Krishna wanted him to fight, and his point was that what you have, everything animate and inanimate, is owned and controlled by me, and this is the quota that you have, and you have the opportunity to use it in my service, not being attached to the results of how you whether you win or you lose or what you get out of it, but it just in the sake of just doing this for me. And this is the offering. This is the offering. This is the sacrifice. This is yajna. This is the sacrifice of everything while still owning and controlling things temporarily, using them in the service of Krishna while you have them. Text 26. Shrata dinindriyani anye samyag nishu juvati shabda din vishayananya indriyagnishu juvati. Shrota adini, hearing process. Indriyani, senses. Anye, others. Samyana, of restraint. Agnishu, in the fire. Juvati, offers. Shabdadin, sound of vibration, etc. Vishayan, objects of sense gratification. Anye, others. Indraya, of sense organs. Agnishu, in the fire. Juvati, sacrifice. Translation. Some of them sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind, and others sacrifice the objects of the senses, such as sound, in the fire of sacrifice. Purport. The four divisions of human life, namely the brahmacharis, the gridhasta, the vanaprashta, and the sannyasis, are all meant to help men become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the four orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis are students under the care of a bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. They are referred to this verse by sacrificing the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind. So these four ashrams, they're called ashrams, and they're actual, an ashram can be a temple, a spiritual temple, but it can also be a state in your life where you are engaged in spiritual life. So all four stages, although they're different ashrams and they have different varieties of things, they are all meant to control the mind, especially as a brahmachari. When you're young, you're fickle, you're hormonal, your mind is, I work with young middle school kids, and they are completely, when they are allowed to just engage their mind in materialism, they just become like animals. They're crazy. As a brahmachari, you have to be trained by a spiritual master and controlling the senses, the mind, by engaging in lots of kirtan, lots of eating prasadam, lots of learning about spiritual life, and learning your studies as well. Using your time in diverting away from the things that your body is starting to go through and your mind is starting to go through, in order to train your mind to prepare yourself to become a grihasta. If you're going to marry, you can marry, and then there's a certain allotment of sense enjoyment allowed. You're allowed to have sexual intercourse with your wife. You're allowed to make money and engage in the material world, but with the idea of your family being a spiritual unit, not being a complete sensual enjoyment all about yourselves. It's about helping each other develop your spiritual life. And then it continues on as vanaprashta, retired life, and engaging more in the service of your spiritual master and Krishna's mission. And sannyasi is a renounced order, which is not really used accepted in Western modern life because of what it is. So here Bhaktivedanta is saying, since human life is not meant for enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the four orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis are students under the care of the bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. They are referred to this verse as sacrificing the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind. It's amazing. Brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Hari Namanu Kirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. So it's not like you're free for all in your social media, like most young people are watching TikTok, probably a lot of young people watching pornography, watching movies, reading just a bunch of nonsense books. You've used that tendency because of your mind not being controlled and your senses not being controlled to give you materialistic things to do in your life. It's like adding fuel to the flame of like insanity. When we look at like what's happening, every generation degraded, gets more and more degraded, especially with the invention of the cell phone and social media. Has created this society of like disrespectful, rude, obnoxious youth, who completely disrespectful, don't have any connection to their elders, and so as a brahmachari, you're supposed to restrain what kind of material. The chanting is training. It's a training to make you strong spiritually, to give you bala, strength. His hearing is engaged in the transcendental vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He restrains himself from the vibration of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound of vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And, having witnessed young people in the process of who come together and chant, who played musical instruments for the kirtan, who engage in retreats and eat prasadam and whatnot, and are trained by their parents to be devotees of Krishna. They're wonderful young people. They're very respectful. They're very calm, gentle. Similarly, the householders who have some license for sense gratification perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies of human society, but a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratifications. People are crazy. They're crazy, and that's why we have over a 50% divorce rate. People trying to, have polygamy and polyamorous, marrying more than one person and having girlfriends and boyfriends and broken households and kids with only one parent. Marriage on principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized society, and because this is the way for unrestricted sex life. This restricted, unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna, because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency towards sense gratification for higher transcendental life. So when you're trained to become a householder, you're grounded, and then you have to maintain that. Otherwise, you can fall off the edge real quickly. Okay, maybe one more verse. Let's see. Yeah. Text 27. Savalindra karmani prana karmani kapchapare atma shamyamya yoganao juvati ganadipite sarvani, all indriya senses, karmani functions, prana karmani functions of the life breath, cha also, apare also, others, atma samya controlling the mind, yoga linking process, agnau in the fire of, chuvati offers, Gana dipite because of the urge for self-realization. Translation: those who are interested in self-realization in terms of mind and sense control offer the functions of all the senses, as well as the vital force breath, as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Purport: the yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyag Atma and Parag Atma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Parag Atma. The soul is subjected to the functions of 10 kinds of air at work within the body. This is the pranayam, the life airs within the body. This is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjala system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to the yoga system, pratyagatma is the ultimate goal. This pratyag is atma is a withdrawal from activities and matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, the eyes for seeing, the nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, hand for touching, and all of them are thus engaged in activities outside of the self. They are called the functions of prana vayu. The apana vayu goes downward. Vayana vayu acts to shrink and expand. Samana vayu adjusts equilibrium. Udana vayu goes upward, and when one is enlightened, one engages all these in searching for self-realization. That's a pretty complex subject, the pranayama and the life airs, and we're not going to get into that right now because my knowledge of it is not so, I don't have a lot of knowledge with that, so I don't want to really speak on that. Other than just knowing that there are different kinds of sacrifices, and even in the active pranayama, or the controlling of the life airs, is part of one of the original Ashtanga yoga systems, which included yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dhyana, dharyan, and samadhi. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And I think we're going to leave it at that. I know it's kind of not much to say in that last verse. And but you know, one thing I could say about Krishna is that he explains thoroughly all of the different aspects of the Vedic systems and rules and regulations and different paths and whatnot, only to basically in the end say, abandon all these varieties of religion and the paths and just surrender to Krishna. Just surrender to Krishna. That is the ultimate of bhakti yoga, is to surrender your life in love to Krishna and to be in loving service and loving relationship with Krishna. Okay, so thank you very much. Hari Bol.